What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. A lot of news today at One Bills Drive as the Bills have announced that Sean McDermott will be the next head coach, the 19th head coach in Buffalo Bills history. But I have a lot to talk about besides the Buffalo Bills. I talked about that this morning. This is the Thomas Take tonight. That was the Thomas Take in the morning. And I want to talk about B.J. Penn, the former UFC lightweight champion and the former UFC welterweight champion. I want to give my take on B.J. Penn's comeback, his return to the octagon, which will be on January 15th against the young, rising phenom Yair Rodriguez. I'm very excited to see this fight. I'm very excited to see the build-up of this fight. I've already gotten a taste of it a little bit with the UFC Fight Night Countdown, and it's going to be a good one, without a doubt. You have a guy like B.J. Penn who has done so much for the sport. I think in the history of the sport, there is only one guy that comes to mind when you talk about the lighter weight classes. B.J. Penn is one of them. He invented the 155-pound division. He was the second guy to be a two-time champion, a two-weight champion. Now Conor McGregor is most known for that. B.J. Penn was the first guy to actually accomplish that and do it in a fashion that was pretty extraordinary, beating Matt Hughes in a welterweight title fight where he was not a huge underdog, but at the time Matt Hughes was a invisible force, so to speak. He was running through pretty much everybody, and BJ was the smaller man compared to Matt Hughes, and BJ Penn choked out Matt Hughes. That was a huge moment in the sport of mixed martial arts, a huge moment in the history of BJ Penn's career. And along the way, there was a contract dispute. BJ Penn decided to fight in Japan. He comes back as a lightweight. At that time, the lightweight division was pretty brand new. Takes on a guy that he had beef with in Jens Pulver, beats him, and then proceeds to make his way up the lightweight ranks and defeats Sean Shirk, the champion at the time, and then goes on a complete separate career legacy-defining run where he became one of the best fighters of all time. And obviously, the biggest stigma with B.J. Penn is that he did not fight at a particular weight. He didn't care about weight classes. He fought at multiple weight classes. He even fought former UFC light heavyweight champion Lyoto Machida in another event, in another event back, I believe it was in like 2005, 2003. Something crazy like that, at a K1 event in 2005. So, losing to Machida in a decision, which was his second career loss at the time. So, he's had amazing moments in the octagon. He's had two separate careers, almost three separate careers. He had the career of becoming the welterweight champion, and then going to other organizations, reinventing himself, fighting anyone who was willing to oblige, and then coming back as a UFC lightweight and becoming the UFC lightweight champion, defending his belt time and time again, even trying to go for the UFC welterweight belt once again after defending the UFC lightweight belt. It was an amazing career for B.J. Penn, and one of the best moments in my lifetime of watching mixed martial arts was watching B.J. Penn's performance against Diego Sanchez. At the time, Diego might have been considered one of the guys that could really put B.J. in a deep water-like fight, and B.J. Penn just completely ran through him, completely destroyed him, and showed why he was above and beyond everybody else in the UFC's lightweight division. Eventually, he lost his belt to Frankie Edgar. He was given a rematch. He lost the rematch as well. Then he fought Matt Hughes again in a trilogy fight. That was his last win inside the UFC octagon. That win was in 2010. So he has not won a fight in 7 years, fighting John Fitch to a draw, fighting Nick Diaz, fighting Rory McDonald, fighting Frankie Edgar again, and now he'll be taking on a young up-and-comer, Yair Rodriguez. And along the way, there has been gaps within those fights. He took the break from fighting Rory McDonald after he lost that fight. Rory McDonald and Nick Diaz, those are two big welterweights. Those are two guys that he should not have been fighting. But like I said earlier, B.J. Penn does not care what weight he fights at, or he used to not care what weight he would fight at. He would fight anyone that was willing to fight him, and with the hope that he would beat them. And in most cases, he did. But the young, new age talent like Nick Diaz and Rory McDonald and the quick, elusive speed of Frankie Edgar caught up to him. The sport did kind of catch up to him a little bit. There's huge questions as to whether B.J. Penn can win this fight, due in large part to what I just said. He's lost his last 3 fights. He hasn't fought in quite some time. He looked pretty bad in his last performance versus Frankie Edgar on the Ultimate Fighter finale card, when he was a coach versus Frankie Edgar on one of the Ultimate Fighter seasons a few years ago. And I thought B.J. Penn was done. He even said as much in the octagon. He said that he should have listened to Dana. He shouldn't have come back. And when I heard that he first was, I was a little shocked, but recent developments have led me to think that B.J. Penn actually has a damn good chance of winning this fight. And that might sound crazy, but he's training at Greg Jackson's gym, a gym that is probably the #1 gym in the world in mixed martial arts, a gym that has housed many, many champions: John Jones, Holly Holm, Carlos Condit, guys that are the top of the top level athletes in mixed martial arts. Donald Cerrone, Tim Kennedy, Rashad Evans, a who's who, George St. Pierre even. And George St. Pierre was kind of the rival to B.J. Penn at one point. So for B.J. Penn to kind of go to the rival and say, hey, I want you guys to train me, I want you guys to show me the way, it's pretty damn interesting, I think. And in watching the UFC Countdown documentary about B.J. Penn's comeback, he was training with Diego Sanchez, who he had beat in a title defense pretty decisively, causing a head kick cut on Diego's forehead that has still left a scar to this very day. So, really interesting stuff. For all the casual fans, for all the people that don't know a lot about mixed martial arts, for all the people that want to start watching mixed martial arts, I would watch the UFC Fight Night Countdown, Yair Rodriguez versus B.J. Penn. It's a great, great history lesson on the career of one of the best in the sport, one of the greatest MMA athletes of all time, the greatest UFC lightweight ever, B.J. Penn, the prodigy B.J. Penn. I'm very excited to see him come back. I'm really pulling for him. But I wanted to talk a little bit about his opponent as well, and Yair Rodriguez. This kid is an up-and-comer, to say the least. He won the Ultimate Fighter Latin America. He's 24 years old. He's undefeated. Actually, one of his last few fights he lost. He's actually lost 2 fights. I thought he lost 1 fight. Wow. He lost 1 by submission and 1 by knockout. My bad. But yeah, he's a guy that is an up-and-comer, one of the better unorthodox strikers in mixed martial arts. In mixed martial arts, he's a high-flying guy. He throws lots of kicks, lots of different angled punches. He did fight Alex Caceres to a split decision in his last fight back in August. So, could Yair Rodriguez be too green of a prospect to take on B.J. Penn? That's the question. Is B.J. Penn too long in the tooth to defeat a guy like Yair Rodriguez? That's an even bigger question at this point. I'm really excited for this fight, though. I think this is a great fight to put on national TV, on FS1, and I really hope we see the best B.J. Penn. Regardless what B.J. Penn did for the sport, he's one of those guys that contributed to the sport like a Chuck Liddell, like a Randy Couture, like a George St. Pierre, like a Matt Hughes. He's of the old guard. And those guys are legends of the sport. He's a UFC Hall of Famer, for crying out loud. I would love to see him come back and win this fight, especially given the fact that he is now training at Greg Jackson's gym. I hope that has been enough. And the stigma that was associated with B.J. Penn for quite some time was if he just trained at a real gym, if he trained at a real camp, like a Jackson's or an American Top Team or a real staple gym in mixed martial arts, he'd have a better chance at winning more fights. He's always had that potential. He's always had an amazing athletic ability, amazing dexterity in his legs. He's got great takedown defense. He won a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament after being a black belt for barely, half a year. He got that black belt in a span of 3 years, which is unheard of. And another thing that I noticed, too, in doing research about B.J. Penn in years past, he was the first Hawaiian to win a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament. That's pretty remarkable. He's a guy that has definitely paved the way for a new generation of Hawaiian fighters. We've seen Travis Brown. Now we have seen Max Holloway, who's the interim featherweight champion. And B.J. Penn is pretty adamant that his quest in the featherweight division, which was where he fought his last fight versus Frankie Edgar, his quest in fighting at the featherweight division is to get the third belt in a third weight class within the UFC organization. That is a tall order, given that the guys at the division that are at the peak of their prime, Jose Aldo and Max Holloway, is a young star, a young gun. It'll be very interesting to see if that is something that B.J. Penn can do. Regardless, what B.J. Penn did for the sport was unprecedented. His fights with George St. Pierre were some of the biggest pay-per-views of all time for the time in which they were fought. He fought the who's who, Matt Hughes, Diego Sanchez, Sean Shirk, guys that were really a part of building the UFC into what it is today. And I can't help but root for a guy like that. You can't help but appreciate what it was that he did over the course of his career. 3 fights with Matt Hughes. Each fight was as entertaining as the next. The last one ending in TKO fashion in 20 seconds by a right hand from B.J. Penn. You can't write that. You just can't write that. There's fighters that constantly say that he is a pillar for mixed martial arts. He's on the Mount Rushmore of mixed martial arts. When you think of B.J. Penn, he was the first guy to really establish himself as one of the UFC's main draws. His pay-per-views reached 800,000, 900,000 when the sport was only legal in maybe 35 to 38 states. So he was a guy that really helped bring the UFC to where it is today. And I really hope that we see sort of a vintage B.J. Penn. I hope to see a B.J. Penn that can win the fight easy, can get to Yair Rodriguez and win in devastating fashion. I like Yair Rodriguez a lot, but I'm really itching to see B.J. Penn get a W in his return fight. I mean, the fight with Jens Pulver, he pretty much tore his head off in the second fight, winning that by submission. Everything that he has done, everything that he has done over the course of his career will never go unnoticed, and that's why he is in the UFC Hall of Fame. Hopefully that gave you guys insight on the career of B.J. Penn. Tune in on Sunday night on Fox Sports 1 to watch one of the greatest mixed martial arts of all time, one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time, come back into the octagon for what could be his last fight or what could be his road to an incredible and improbable comeback. Take care.